All right, so I want to take you through an article I read by the Honest Sorcerer, B, who I follow. He's quite good, I think. So again, I'm curating here. What can I say? People do a good job of articulating these complex topics and do good work. So why should I recreate it? Just talk about it real quick because I find it really important and interesting. So this piece is called Until Debt Tear Us Apart, and by the Honest Sorcerer. So I'm just going to go ahead and walk you through it. Okay, so allow me to put this on the radar for you because I think it's important to have these perspectives, or as Peter Josephs likes to say, train of thought. I kind of like that expression, train of thought, but also just perspectives, because we need to train ourselves to look at things from various perspectives, even those that we are uncomfortable with or don't want to pay attention to or disagree with, and so on. And we have to understand a little bit better why we are against things, why we're bigoted, why we're chauvinistic, why we're taking sides, analyze it a bit more, analyze our own thinking and positions, and be willing to at least pay attention to different perspectives. And this is important because these ideas have been floating around forever, and they're still relevant even in our current context in 2025, with all kinds of things going on, where a lot of what we're encountering daily is mysterious to us, as mysterious as things might have been during the Paleolithic period or the early civilizations in Mesopotamia or whatever. Because we don't know how the machine works. We don't understand the physics. We don't understand the science. We don't understand the math. We don't understand the chemistry. We don't understand the cosmology, the language, the philosophy, whatever it is. There's a lot of gaps in our knowledge, so no matter what we think we don't know much. And it's my problem. My core problem is I keep learning and shifting a little bit over time. I'm still at core the same person, I guess, that I was when I was 25, but my perspectives and thinking and so on have evolved over time. I'm not saying it's a good thing or it makes me holy or special. It's, you know, I'm a moderately productive person, but I'm not consequential. So, who cares what I've learned, right? But I've enjoyed learning and shifting, so updating my priors, being a little bit more Bayesian, and blah, 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 blah. And, it's true that, decades ago, I didn't even know what those terms meant. So, and I couldn't explain it to a 10-year-old or a 20-year-old. I would have to refer to some notes. I could vaguely describe what, Bayesian probability theory is, or even the theory of evolution that I like so much and have read on so much over the years. It would still be difficult for me to explain all of the lines of evidence that support it and have evolved over time since Darwin wrote The Origin of the Species and so on. I'm not an academic. I'm not a biologist. Um, I'm not an anthropologist, blah, blah, blah. So, I have limited knowledge, but I do understand it, and I'm aware of it, and, evolution and what it means and how important it is. And so, if I look at religion and philosophy, I look at it through a different lens than I would science or physics. one of these other domains. It's not non-overlapping magisterii, like Stephen Jay Gould said, but it's more like these things can all be there, and it's okay. I'm not going to suffer much cognitive dissonance over it. It's not walking and chewing gum. It's just like, yeah, you know, these religious points of view exist, and these other belief systems exist, and this science domain exists, and so on. And one doesn't necessarily need to be an expert in any of it. You could just be aware of it and respect it for what it is, right? Even if you disagree with it. And it's not really live and let live, because I'm sure there are more ideal ways of doing things in the world, but who's doing it, in what context, where, what period of history, you know. It's not all relative. I'm not a cultural relativist or something like that, but you know, there are differences, and it's good to understand our differences and then to, you know, be a little more introspective with regards to our own thinking. So anyway, this is Until Death Tear Us Apart, The Honest Sorcerer, or B. I follow him on Substack, and he's very interesting. I'm with his train of thought on a lot of things. I agree with Eric Lee and other people. You give people, you know, you pay attention to people, but you know, to a degree, right? With a grain of salt or whatever you say. You know, nobody's perfect. Nobody knows it all. People have things to contribute. Some people are a little bit more sincere and considered and respectful and integritous with their opinions and ideas and thoughts. Other people are less so. We don't have to judge them. We just notice that and understand it when we're looking at their work. I think B is a honest intellectual, and I think he's earnest in his efforts. So I appreciate what he does. And as a curator, I recommend you look at it if you're interested. So from the beginning, he talks about, he writes about economics of ancient times and how they affect us today. And he is not a historian, and so he relies on other people who with more expertise. And he mentions David Graeber and David Wengrow and Michael Hudson. I really like Michael Hudson's work. From my perspective, I think it's good. I know all these things are debated by other kinds of people who believe other things. David Graeber has some critics, but still the perspective is interesting and important and should be looked at if you're interested in how people look at history, do history, and so on. So he says the main theme in Hudson's theory of economics is the rise of a rentier class and finance capitalism, siphoning off wealth out of the economy. That's, to me, is self-evident. I don't know why people can't see it as a core issue or core aspect of our predicament or challenge or problem or whatever. So anyway, after centuries of exorbitant growth, now we witness the system's self-destruction on a global scale, with things unfolding almost exactly. So he mentions after centuries of exorbitant growth, now we witness the system's self-destruction on a global scale, with things unfolding almost exactly as it was forecast by Aristotle almost 2,400 years ago. I listened to a hardcore history episode recently about Africa, fantastic. You have to understand that all these kinds of empires and things were happening globally, at the same time over thousands of years. And we focus on one or the other because uh, of our proximity to it or our interest in it or whatever. But lots of things have been going on for 2000 years BCE and so on, and since Aristotle's time, and these people had wisdom and common sense, and they were human beings just like us. People who say we can't learn from indigenous groups of people or oral history, I think, are very misguided. Collapse doesn't happen overnight. It took Byzantium and Rome hundreds of years, arguably, to collapse. They were in the process of it. It's hard to put a starting date on it and an ending date on it. It doesn't work that way. And also, it doesn't just disappear. Rome just didn't disappear off the face of the earth. Lots of its ideas and structures and art and architecture and different things have persisted over time to this day, just like Aristotle's ideas. And of course, without the Arabs in the Middle Ages, the scribes taking care to write their work down, we might not even know who Aristotle is. All these things are happening at once, and it's good to appreciate all of it and see how it all fits together in certain ways. So this is the synopsis of this. I'll go ahead and take you through that because I'm not going to read the whole article. That's boring. Let's start things off with where we are at the moment. As of today, 37% of U.S. GDP comes from real estate, finance, insurance, and professional business services, law, consulting, brokerages, etc. Activities which produce very little tangible value, yet cost exorbitant amounts of money. Yes, these professions are a vital part to a functioning economy, but when more than a third of a nation's GDP is spent on them, then there is something seriously and badly amiss. For comparison, manufacturing, mining, agriculture, and construction together represents a mere 28% of the U.S. economy. A thing to ponder on. Based on these simple facts, I believe it is not far-fetched to call the U.S. and most Western economies rentier economies. So if you don't understand what that is, I would look it up and read about it. It's important. But why is that a problem, besides the bad taste these words leave in one's mouth? The answer is simple. Such an arrangement strangles the economy and will lead to its eventual collapse, even without resource depletion and climate change or wars. So I'm glad he mentioned these things because bit by bit, materials become more scarce and harder to get, requiring more energy to extract. And fossil fuels are a limited resource, so there has to be some form of energy transition. And without that, we don't have these big machines that are going to take apart these huge mountains and dig deep into the earth to get all of the minerals and things that we need to continue to have GDP growth and consumerism and all that kind of thing. Make everybody rich. Everybody's going to be so rich, unbelievably rich. We're going to put tariffs on everything. They're going to give us their stuff. We're going to make stuff with it. It's going to be so rich. You're going to have 5-car garages. I'm much more in the managed growth or degrowth or different kind of growth mindset than most people. So I think, if I were a developing country and a leader in a developing country, I'd be thinking about different forms of growth, different ways of organizing the economy and so on. It's very difficult. And of course, there are constraints and restraints on that when you start thinking differently. Different things constrain you, right? Because you may not be able to rely on the global economy as much, on global logistics and materials flows, stocks and flows, systems, and so on. So, besides their outside share of economic transactions, profit rates in the fire, finance, insurance, and real estate sector grew from 20% in the 80s versus 8% in manufacturing to 35% in the 2010s and can be expected to rise further still. Again, there's a limit to growth, whether you're aware of the Club of Rome or not. Limits to growth exist. That should be self-evident. I mean, we are all going to die at some point. Our immune systems get out of whack and we die. There are limits to growth. How tall are you? Can you be taller when you're 40 without surgical intervention or whatever? There are limits to growth. And we put more limits on it if we destroy the ocean through AMOC, the circulation of phosphates and so on in the ocean, nitrates, phosphates. The food chain, if we damage the food chain, the ocean isn't a sink anymore, carbon sink. So, I mean, it's all interconnected. There are limits to everything. And we can increase limits, create more limits, or we can extend limits or work around them or whatever. But there are always constraints in any system. And to be creative in engineering or design, you have to almost imagine constraints, think through constraints, and then be creative about how you build or design something with those constraints in mind. And that's liberating. Steve Jobs, people like that. I think they think in that way, maybe. I don't know. So double spiral of well-being, elite and overproduction. So the elite overproduction goes up, popular well-being goes down. Green, red. That's interesting. The timeline from 1780, we often talk about the 1750 line in terms of industrialization and fossil fuel use, in terms of climate and so on, up until 2000, whatever. So that's interesting. I would read that. Political scientists Martin Gilens and Benjamin, blah, blah, blah. Economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while mass-based interest groups and average citizens have little or no independent influence. And you know that from polls. People do polls, a Pew or whatever, and they ask people what they want. People say they want this, that, and the other thing, and they never get it, because it's not in the interest of the business elite or whatever, this group or that group. And so, the elites often refer to people as a mob, the idiots, plebs, proles, parochials, morons. Without our leadership and without Papa there to take care of the estate, everybody would be totally it would be a nightmare, breakdown, anarchy. Papa has to be there to take care of the people. So I'm more of the kind of give people a chance, educate them, give them dignity, housing, healthcare, and let them get on with it. And great people will rise up and do wonderful things. Give people a chance. Not everybody's going to be a top tier UFC fighter or somebody who finds a way to cure a particular kind of cancer or whatever. But they'll do good things in their community. They'll be good people. They'll live good lives and so on. Within constraints, obviously, I don't think we can continue to grow the way we're growing and survive as a species. But anyway, that's another thing. Once on top, the ruling class tried to kick away the ladder by insisting on higher and higher entrance fees to the club. They encouraged the implementation of laws making higher education private, where they could set the financial bar as high as they wished. This way, the ruling class hit two birds with one stone. They got the right to select who can enter their circles by limiting admission to the most elite institutions, turning and turned colleges themselves into a linchpin of the wealth pump machinery. Wealth pump is important to learn about. Look that up. Also, it's like George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. By asking for ever higher tuition fees and offering student loans you can't default on, the wealth transfer could continue at an even higher pace. It just doesn't seem right to tax poor people, people without inherited wealth, generational wealth, to have a shot, you know? But that's the way it is. And, you know, it's been like that forever. I mean, you know, throw a dart at a historical timeline and look at the sociological perspective, economic perspective. You know, who's running the show? You know, people want the technocrats to run it now, you know, the CEOs, because they're so efficient and they know how to do things. And, you know, fuck people. They're just instruments. As soon as we get enough, the right kind of robots, ex machina, will just kick people to the curb and populate the global country club with the right kind of people. Yeah, okay, I'm a cynic. Not really, but, you know, hey. So the risk of a network state, this is a big thing people talk about now. AI, Silicon Valley whiz kids, social media and online retail moguls now hold not only the vast majority of stocks and bonds, but also have a considerable sway over U.S. politics. The techno-financial elite has by now become the main beneficiary of the system, securing government contracts on AI, cloud software, or space program installing by satellites en masse, and has begun to replace the old capitalist class at the helm. So think about all the money that SpaceX and Starlink got from the US government, from taxpayers. Think about the fact that Amazon books and Amazon Prime and all that is a lost leader to the amount of money that they make from government services, not AI, but just, data services and so on, and cloud software and whatnot. So the real money is made in that public-private or government-private connection, and the money flows in that system because the money has to move around and it has to move to the right places, the right lines and the right budgets. Not to you, my friend, not to you. We give you an extra $300 a year with some form of a tax cut, and you're so happy. These people shelter their wealth offshore, and they get tons of money from the government. The printing machine goes to the bombs and to the corporations. The modern monetary theory, not to you, not to you. TARP isn't for you, it's to bail out the banks, remember? So I'll just skip down here because, what we're witnessing isn't just a power grab, it's the culmination of an ideology that has been incubated, tested, and refined over a decade. First, these thinkers argued that democracy was inefficient. And remember the hyper-competitiveness within all of this. It's madness. It's total American psycho. Then they created technological tools, cryptocurrency, blockchain governance, and AI-driven decision-making to bypass democratic institutions entirely. So you want to bypass and replace, and that's what they're doing. And is it going to be good for you? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe not. A balkanized America with all these little city-states in it that you can join or leave. It just sounds kind of crazy to me, but what do I know? And they're not really addressing other problems that persist over time. Now they're no longer experimenting. They are seizing control of government infrastructure itself, programming it in real time. to function according to their vision. Now, they're not asking you what you think. Pew isn't polling you on any of this. You have zero power, zero agency, unless you take it up for yourselves and push back. But you need ideas. You need some other plan to replace their plan. You have to have some idea of what you want other than this. And of course, they're selling this to you 24/7. And I can see why younger people would be attracted to it. It's an incredible narrative, and they own the narrative machine. So they're going to pump out these ideas. And for people who are too ignorant, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but people who are too ignorant to understand a lot of what's going on, they're going to pump out culture wars bullshit to keep them excited and on side and distracted while they fleece them. So remember that. Musk is in power now, and he's gonna take over as much as he possibly can with Peter Thiel and all these other guys. So this is why focusing solely on the technical aspects of what's happening inside agencies misses the deeper transformation underway. Every unauthorized server, every AI model, every removed civil servant represents another step in converting democratic governance into what Yarvin called neo-cameralism. So look up cameralism, a system where society is run like a corporation with clear ownership and control rather than democratic deliberation. Remember that a corporation is an autocracy in a sense because the CEO, the buck stops with the CEO. The CEO makes strategic and tactical decisions and delegates to other managers and so on and so forth. And he's doing this for his bonus and compensation package, for his own self-interest, and also for shareholders. So if you're not an owner, a shareholder, you don't matter. Also, boards of directors can be captured by CEOs and by shareholders and so on. And then you have leveraged buyouts and all these kinds of different things going on. Anyway, it's not a democracy. A worker in a corporation can be hired or fired based on whatever the CEO and the management and HR think is appropriate to increasing profits next quarter. You don't matter, really. You are a utilitarian tool of the corporation. If you have the right skills, you get paid well and so on. The infrastructure being built isn't meant to serve democratic needs, okay? It's not a collective. It's not anarcho-syndicalism. It's not a co-op, okay? At scale, at big global scale, it's an autocracy. It's meant to make democracy itself obsolete. And I think these guys want to just boot democracy to the trash heap of history and make everything into a corporation. So we're talking Fordlandia here, right? Ford went to Brazil and made a city. It was some people would say a noble effort, novel idea, but it didn't work. And other people would just say it's crazy, but whatever. So ancient civilizations got rid of the problem of the rising oligarch class together by a clever invention called a debt jubilee. This is what Michael Hudson talks about a lot. And he's done extensive historical research regarding debt jubilees in ancient times. In the lean years when harvests were not so great, peasants took on credit from a class of creditors to feed their families, who in turn were allowed to charge a fee for their services. The problem was, and it is still to this day, that when money is created into existence, or given to you from a pile of gold. Only the principal is handed out to you. The interest, which you must pay back on top of the principal, has to be taken from somewhere else. And in a quasi-steady state economy such as ancient Babylon or Egypt, this presented leaders with an insolvable problem. To solve this simple math problem, jubilees were invented to erase debt from time to time, sometimes as often as every 7 years, in order to prevent peasants from losing their land and staving off creditors from becoming the largest asset holders in the country, amassing more wealth than the king himself. By implementing debt jubilees, the king of old managed to prevent the rise of a rentier class, and thus their kingdoms could remain stable for centuries, if not thousands of years. So think about that. So if our system, metaphorically is like a kingdom or whatever, and you're trying to preserve it for posterity, and you have the rentier class coming up. I mean, these billionaires are so wealthy now and own so many assets that they're like countries, right? People joked about Mark Zuckerberg's Meta being like a country, having a bigger GDP than, or whatever, more wealth than many countries, right? So the past couple of centuries were an anomaly in a number of ways. The biggest anomaly of all, perhaps, was the discovery of technologies allowing us to transform fossil fuels into food and consumer products en masse. So the Haber-Bosch process, the agricultural revolution in India and so on, you couldn't do that without natural gas to make fertilizers, to double crop yields and so on, and feed more people. And then you have this dramatic population increase from the mid-19th century till now, which is topping out, and we're going to have a die-off from now on. You best believe that. And it is what it is. Can't be prevented, I don't think. But anyway, the magical thinkers in the TESCREAL community are going to put us on servers or something. So growth has always been ephemeral and was followed by decline sooner or later, resetting the playing field. So when we talk about the normal cycles of capitalist growth and collapse, or these bubbles and so on, that are a feature of the system, okay? And you buy low, sell high, you short the market and all that stuff. And, okay, that's cool, but there are bigger, more dramatic declines that can happen when you factor in the sixth extinction, ecological problems, ecocide, nuclear war, high-tech war, global pandemics, climate change, global heating, the problem with dying oceans, on and on and on. You put these things together in a perfect storm and you got a problem. You got a different kind of decline, which we call the polycrisis, by the way, but call it what you will. And you want to not pay attention to it because the shiny bits, you want to chase that laser pointer around on the floor, fine, go ahead. I mean, whatever, rearrange deck chairs, have fun at the party, buy another bottle of champagne. It's all good, but it is what it is, and circumstances will dictate what happens. And you will react to it one way or another. When things get tough, what are you going to do? Grab your bug out bag, have some 30 cals on your wall with interlocking machine gun fire and blah, 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 protect your assets, your fucking hoard. It's a joke. It's all for one and one for all, or we're fucked, in my opinion. So the depletion of rich mineral and fossil fuel deposits and their eventual replacement with ever harder, costlier, and energy-intensive to get resources has put an end to this massive historical anomaly called growth. So for thousands of years, empires came and went, and, Turchin or whatever, you read these guys, And now, boom, we're at a different thing. So I'm going to read another article. I'll stop with this one because that's already 35 minutes. So I hope you appreciated my comments on this. Go ahead and read it, and don't forget to look at all of the hyperlinks. He's got great notes here about the S&P 500, CEO boardroom, blah, blah, blah. Bank loans where money is conjured up, higher interest rates, tariffs. And this is really interesting. I'm going to read this one to you before I stop. Tariffs, contrary to what you're being told, are actually paid by import companies after taking title of the goods at port. Now, tariffs are complex because they are a way of putting pressure on a country and mercantilism and things like that. But, obviously it's a tool, and it's a useful tool in certain circumstances, but it can go way too far. So, for example, you don't have Korean TVs in Japan. There's barriers to that because Japan makes their own TVs. They may manufacture them in China. Everybody does that. But they're their own brand TVs. They sell them in their country. They don't need to import TVs. You have things like that as well, barriers. And that's just kind of normal. Therefore, these companies, and not the original manufacturer, must ask for higher prices from wholesale and retail companies buying the goods from them to compensate for their losses. So, the importer pays more, the wholesaler, retailer pay more, and so on. And so the prices go up, inflation or whatever. So while companies in the country of origin will continue to ask for the same price, so you're still paying the Chinese manufacturer the same thing, Chinese workers are still getting paid the same thing. That has nothing to do with you in America. And by the way, decades of technology transfer and finance allowed for China to become what it is today. We have some responsibility there. Why we can't just compete with them fair and square, I don't know. We have to blow them up. For them, nothing changes, technically speaking. Local manufacturers of similar goods are now presented with an opportunity to raise their prices up to the level where they can still remain competitive. So let's say a Chinese vehicle sold by the manufacturer for $30K is hit by a tariff of 100%. So you got a $60K car. The import company registered in the U.S., U.S. company, will buy this vehicle for $30K from the Chinese, then pay the government $30K as a tariff. And where do you think this $30K is going to go? To Social Security or health care? I doubt it. Not with Donald J. Trump. But they pay the government $30K. They then will sell the car to a retailer at a markup of, say, 10%. So you're $66K, who will then also put his markup or plus VAT, value-added tax, on it, and then sells it to you for $90K. So you're getting fucked. You're getting robbed all along the chain. And now you're paying $90K for a car, but you're also borrowing money to buy the car. So you have financing and all that shit. So we're back up at the top of this article. You're just getting fleeced all over the place. Everybody gets richer while you pay 3 times the price of the vehicle plus financing charges. For what exactly? Meanwhile, a local manufacturer realizes that his $50,000 vehicle ex-factory suddenly looks dirt cheap and decides to raise the price to $60,000 before selling it to a retailer, who then puts his markup plus value-added tax on it and then sells it to you for $80K. Everybody wins without doing anything else than raising prices, except you, my friend. Not for you. Of course. So why bother with building factories at home? And, most corporations decided they were going to manufacture in China because of labor arbitrage. It was cheaper. You make more profits. Shareholders are happier. Stock prices go up. So And then when China becomes too expensive, you move it to Vietnam or Bangladesh or Pakistan or wherever. Global economy, people. It's not about you at home. And the only time you're going to be manufacturing at home is when you're making knives. You have your local business. We're back to the 18th century, when all of you have to do is raise prices to match those increased by tariffs. The fly in the ointment is the immiseration of the masses. Oh, the masses, the mob, the crazy revolutionaries, Jacobins, heads are going to roll. As the discretionary budget of the average citizen gets squeezed by inflation and wage stagnation, never forget that. Have your wages gone up? And when you're manufacturing in the States again, and you have to import or get raw materials and energy from somewhere, unless you completely mine and extract from your country. NIMBY, go to hell. Yes, in my backyard. Take it up, motherfucker. I got a job with a wage. And so on. And you don't want a labor movement. You don't want unions. You're just going to trust that these corporatists up here at the top of the article are going to take care of you. The fly in the ointment is the immiseration, man. They will no longer be able to buy a car at all. So there you go. Davos crowd. You're going to own nothing and be happy. Don't think they're not taking you there. You're going to be crypto taxed for breathing the air in the future. They're, libertarians don't want any taxes. Come to my network city, man, and we have our own currency. And well, where the hell are you going to get your security from? We got our own army. We got our own insurance company. We got our own water. We got our own materials. Where are you going to get it? Without the empire, without the imperial United States of America, neocolonialism, where are you going to go and get your rare earths, your raw earths, and all the other shit that you need to do whatever you're going to do? Well, in my network state, we don't do any of that. We're tomatoes. We're all about tomatoes, if you care, and we just trade tomatoes because we live in a region. Our blood and soil is all about tomatoes. And, we have a few people who make some nice materials out of sheep's, wool, and we trade that as well. It's wonderful. Give me a break. Think things through. So amount of vehicles made both in China and the U.S., this, on the other hand, will lead to layoffs and a further reduction in consumer spending, and voila, recession. And don't think that good old Donald Trump with his TV show, "You're fired," and fucking Elon Musk don't like to fire people. They don't give a flying fuck about you. Pardon my language, but they don't. You're going to be thrown to the curb. Just like, we need Ukraine to fight the Russians because our oligarchs should be running Russia. And so we need that war. Ukrainians are going to die. French people, whoever wants to die can die. We're not going to die. And then when it's no longer profitable for the right kind of people, we're going to throw you to the curb. There you go, folks. 43 minutes. Sorry for that. Take good care. Bully MT out.